Okay, we're live.
Hello.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
This is actually my first live without Erin.
Oh,
So I know. So I'm feeling a little bit discombobulated, but also a little bit like wild and adventurous. Yeah, I'm like, I could say and do whatever I want. She's not here. So that's how I'm coming into the space. A little bit like Erin's not here, but also excited to be able to have a one-on-one with you.
yeah.
For those Actually, my first question was actually going to, because I'm trying to reimagine, we are collectively trying to reimagine Erin and a group of circles and myself, how to reintroduce ourselves in a way that doesn't center our profession
Mhm.
and the work that we do. I would love for you to introduce yourself, begin by introducing yourself without your titles or your hats and the bounds of your
Mhm.
professional role.
Yes, I like that challenge because I feel
Yeah.
like it's such a default. That's often what people are asking, right? Professional.
Mhm.
Such a challenge sometimes to think outside of that. So I appreciate that request. I would defer to astrology, I guess. Other
Love
label.
that.
But so I'm a Virgo sun and Pisces moon, and I really relate to these. So in terms of a Virgo sun, um, I have a reverence for ritual. I love a ritual.
Mm,
You know, I think, yeah, attention to detail, but it's more in a ritualistic sense, like a spiritual and ritualistic sense. And then I'm simultaneously very emotionally sensitive, which is the Pisces side, and drawn to creativity. Um, and then I have a Sagittarius rising. So I drive around in this shiny red car, like, yes, I can do it all. But that's not my true nature. Like, I think it gets me into a lot of trouble. It gets me to do a lot more work than I really should be doing or
yeah.
want to do, because really at my heart, I think I resonate with that earth element, and I feel most comfortable horizontal, like on a yoga mat. And I think I also act as a grounding sense for a lot of folks in my life. So
Hmm.
different labels, but pulling from the elements is, I guess, where I would go if I were not to start with profession.
That's so fascinating. And for folks who are into astrology like myself, it's so telling. The minute you said Virgo sun, Pisces moon, I was like, oh, right, of course. I get it.
What are
I get it.
you?
I'm Aries sun.
Ooh.
I know. So fiery, go getter.
Mhm,
Um, I like taking up initiatives and leading.
mhm,
Sag moon.
mhm. You're just a
So
lot of
I'm a,
fire.
I'm a little pocket of fire. What balances me out is my Pisces rising. So we
Ah,
have that, and we have common signs in different
yeah,
placements, and then I have Pisces all over my chart. So I'm one big sensitive fireball.
fireball, yeah. I I have lots of Aries in my life. My mom, my partner, I feel like I'm drawn to Aries.
Yeah,
Both
I'm also
placed
drawn to
with Aries.
Virgo. My partner is a Virgo, so
Oh, yeah.
we've switched there. That's really funny.
Fun.
Thank you for that and for indulging in that. And for the folks who are not into astrology, super sorry. Super sorry. But for those who are, they're probably going to enjoy this. Um, I guess I'll follow up with the role and the official introduction in terms of the context of your work and what brought us together. So, first and foremost, you are Erin's childhood friend's life partner. And I know that I kid you not, I think I told you this when I first met you in Toronto, has been speaking about you maybe since day one, if not day one, like day eight of us deciding to launch New Room. You've kind of always been an undercurrent of um, inspiration and someone that she and now I share that feeling has been wanting to bring you in on and see how we can collaborate. So You are an associate professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies in the Department of Historical Studies, I think,
Yep.
at U of T,
Mm-hmm.
with a graduate appointment in the Women and Gender Studies Institute at the U of T. Is there a difference between U of T Mississauga and U of T?
Yeah, so there are 3 different campuses.
Yeah.
University of Toronto Scarborough, University of Toronto Mississauga, and University of Toronto downtown St. George campus. So
Okay.
the graduate students at the Mississauga campus and graduate students at the downtown campus.
Mm,
One university, but different campuses.
different campuses. Got it.
Yeah.
Your kind of official bio reads, her scholarship has a strong interdisciplinary approach to questions of care, affect, gendered and racialized risk, technoscience, and coloniality in the Black Atlantic, which is like, wow. How all of those are connected is, I'm putting a pin on those. Your writing can be found in the journals Social Text, Feminist Studies, Feminist Formations, Feminist Media Studies, and Citizenship Studies. Your first book, Suspicion, Vaccines, Hesitancy, and the Effective Politics of Protection in Barbados, was published by Duke University Press in 2022 and examines the post-colonial, transnational, and effective stakes behind the promotion and refusal of the HPV vaccine in Barbados. I mean, I know we had a list of questions, so I'm gonna freestyle here just because of rereading this. I know I've read this maybe 3 times by now, and every time I'm like, how? So the first question I guess that comes to me is, what is how did you? What's the relationship between technoscience, gender women studies, coloniality? How did that all come together?
I think that just the name of this chat that we're having right now, rooting in intersectionality, really just speaks to that, right? It's a lot. My academic work is a direct reflection of my lived experience and reality as somebody who was born in Canada but grew up in Trinidad and Tobago and then returned to Canada to do school. I became a woman of color, right? Like that wasn't a thing. So my feminist consciousness and becoming a woman of color quite literally in the context of North America, really led me to these writings of women of color feminists. And, I learned so much through their writing, through their teaching, through their personal, through the genre of the personal. Like a lot of it was poems and storytelling. That led me to understand a lot of my own experiences. And so just in terms of the topic of my first book, it was a direct emergence of my own parents' ambivalence around the HPV vaccine, nearly 2 decades ago now. That led me to, and they encouraged me when I went off to do my undergrad studies to look into the connections between gender and sexuality and, without naming it, their own ambivalence as a racialized person. And so I think I came into that feminist, that woman of color consciousness in an academic setting that allowed me to pull these strands together. But theory is just lived experience. And so that's ultimately what my writing is a reflection of, even if it doesn't center me, but it centers other people's experiences. So in the case of my book, Black Barbadians.
Fascinating. And I also know this also wasn't on our list of questions, so I'm so sorry for freestyling again, but I'm curious to know, amongst all of those topics and everything that you've done thus far and written thus far, what is the most important to you? Like what speaks to you the most?
I think This is a tricky question to answer because there's so much of what I do feels constrained within the walls of the academy.
Right.
And to get to a certain point in my career, there needed to be an emphasis on single authored publications and, proving your worth and yourself by doing it alone, essentially.
Mhm.
And where I feel most inspired is through collaboration and creative works, which just by nature of the neoliberal academic institution is not celebrated in the same way.
Right.
And so now that I have tenure, I have this opportunity to do more of this collaborative work, this creative work, and I'm so excited about that. And I'm heading to Barbados in January to begin a new project with colleagues at the University of the West Indies that's going to be looking at sugar and food and diet and colonialism, and we're integrating digital artists into this project. I can't even remember what the initial question was, but I think it was mostly about which part lights you up the most.
Yeah.
And it's the part that I'm about to begin.
Right.
Yeah.
With that you get to do now as a result of essentially your tenureship and your experience and your exciting, super, super exciting. You mentioned earlier that, when I asked you what the connection between all of those things were, so technoscience and coloniality and vaccine hesitancy, you mentioned intersectionality kind of being at the root of that and the common thread through all of those things. And so I'm curious to know and to hear from you why you think intersectionality is such a critical tool for us to understand the context of the past and the current realities that we're facing today and the current kind of social issues and uprising we're seeing, but then also how it could be used as a tool to redesign and reimagine the systems we live in.
Yeah, I think I like to start discussions of intersectionality thinking about it in a multifaceted way, like intersectionality as a reality of past and present, as you said. So, that being like the interconnectedness or overlapping nature of our identities. So for example, I identify as a Black cisgendered woman, and systems in our world accrue oppression onto some of my identities more than others, right? Like we can think of Colin Moya Bailey's term misogynoir, which speaks to the unique way that Black women experience misogyny that is a direct result of both their race and gender, right? Like these things can be disentangled. And the lived experience of the forms of oppression that attach to these identities is so much more complicated than if we try to pull them apart. And then the second way I like to think of intersectionality, or that we should, I would say, think of intersectionality is as this mode of analysis that was really offered to us through Black feminist thought and a methodological approach to analyzing what's happening in our world so that we can ultimately dismantle injurious systems, right? And so, like, if we were to think about what its utility is as a tool, as a mode of analysis, it really is to get us to keep our eye on these multiple things that are happening. Because systems are designed to be invisible. Their workings and overlappings are designed to be invisible. But once we identify the interconnections, I think it's almost impossible to stop
Not to see them.
Right? Like it really just starts setting something off, and it can be overwhelming. It's also super empowering, right? And a failure to make these connections about these connections and interconnections really, I would say like holds us, binds us in a very like linear way of thinking that never disentangle us from colonial systems and dominant forms of power.
So powerful. I appreciate that you reframed it first and foremost as a lived experience, because I think that sometimes it's so easy to anchor in theology and anchor in the theory of things. and distance ourselves from the fact that it's first and foremost a very real circumstance and experience that folks are living before it is a theory, before it becomes a framework and a tool for analysis. So I appreciate the recentering on that.
Yeah. And I think also just one other thing to mention, like, Kimberly Crenshaw says this, like, we have to ensure that our modes of analysis are intersectional. Otherwise, systems of oppression will end up reinforcing one another, right? So, like, especially in, anti-racist work or ideas work, as you term it, right? Like, it needs to simultaneously be, like, anti-racist work needs to simultaneously be feminist work, because racism and patriarchy upholds each other if they are not addressed or attacked simultaneously. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that. And obviously the conversation around intersectionality kind of drives and colors quotes and sayings like the personal is political, and I think another one that you mentioned to us was, is it the personal is profoundly political? When you had emailed us, Erin and myself, I had actually corrected myself after your email. But I'm curious to know from you what those sayings actually mean. So they've become these kind of like taglines and these pins. I actually have a pin that says that. Like a literal and figurative pin. But what does it actually mean?
I mean, I think when I think about that saying, I'm thinking about, again, like, the connections between that which is personal, intimate, potentially privately experienced, and things that are more systemic, social, socioeconomic, political experiences, structures, happenings. And it takes me to a quote from Audre Lorde. And she said this in 1988, written in A Burst of Light is the name of the text. And she said, self-care, and this is not an exact quote, but, it's about self-care. And she says, caring for myself is not indulgence. It's self-preservation, and it's an act of political warfare. And whenever I teach Audre Lorde, I'd like to start with this quote to think about the personal and the political, because this quote is simultaneously a personal statement, a theoretical statement, a political statement, right? And Lorde wrote this, after being diagnosed with cancer for a second time, really reflecting on her experience as a Black, queer, feminist writer, poet, civil rights activist. And she's calling attention to, in this larger piece, but we can start just from this quote, she's calling attention to how self-care and acts of self-care are essential to process her trauma.
Right.
And to think about how she can exist in the face of forces of domination that are impacting her life, right? And this extends to, like, environmental racism, right? She's thinking about her health, her lived reality. And so I feel like when we think about the personal, and we think about this quotation, we can really see the connections between the personal and political at all time, and between theory and praxis, right? To get back to, like, how you started this question, thinking about, like, what's theoretical. And I think that's what I love about feminist work. Often in academia, there's a lot of theory, but it seems to be divorced from personal experience, and feminism is lived experience.
Right.
And
I think it
political.
I was just going to add that two things. One, Erin and I, as it pertains to this quote, I often have to remind her that even when we use it in our work, right now, that quote is also one that's become a tagline, the one around self-care, and that we see in wellness movements, oftentimes in non-Black wellness movements, that people have essentially co-opted to say, like, or to, as a means to disassociate from political engagement.
That's right.
And they have essentially conflated, and maybe not conflated, but used self-care as this shield, because it's not coming from lived experience.
That's right.
And for folks that are equity deserving, for folks that have used you existing on the margins, they can't afford to not engage in our political systems, because every single policy directly impacts them at a personal level. So I like to remind Erin, and I occupy these wellness circles, and a lot of my friends are in wellness spaces, and I appreciate the quote. I think it's important. I think as more and more people are coming into and walking into the social justice space, more and people from all walks of life, the reminder for self-care is critical in order to sustain political advocacy work. And knowing its history and knowing its roots is important.
100%. And like everything you just said, right? The way that self-care has become a neoliberal tool is not what this quote is about at all. And so it's definitely super misleading, the way it's often operationalized within wellness circles, which I also occupy. And I think it's always important when we take a quote like this that we ground it in the text from which it came and the context from which the author was speaking, right? Like, as I think I tried to just point to very briefly, it's a very political statement rooted in Lord's personal experiences, one of which is cancer, right? One of which is being a Black woman, lesbian, right? Like, there's so much that we need to pull apart, and that self-care is part of her political activism, right? It's really different than taking a bubble bath and painting your nails to feel good, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what Lord is talking about in this context.
Absolutely. I think for me, it's also a good reminder of rest. We've been seeing this notion of rest also emerge, and the importance of rest to sustain movement work.
That's right.
Because it is exhausting, and it becomes exhausting to one, live in these bodies, exist in these bodies, but for the folks, again, who are not existing in these bodies, to do these work. And sometimes they can get tired really quick and forget that the pause is needed in order to sustain. It's just, but it's just a pause.
It's just a pause. I like to think of it as like an integration break, right? Like rest, rejuvenate, continue.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that. Mindful of time, because I know that you have to hop off soon. So I'm going to close with, as a professor, if there is one thing, just one, that you hope that students who take your course retain, what is that one thing?
That's such a big question. I was thinking about it. And I don't know if I have one thing, but I can offer one of many, perhaps, that I think.
Two. I'll give you two.
Okay.
You can do two.
Well, one is that I like to think of like there being no such thing as readiness to engage in anti-racist and intersectional work, right? Like, we're all starting at different places, and readiness is a lie in some senses, right? Being a co-conspirator, being an accomplice to anti-racist work, to social justice work, is about willingness. So you never feel ready, Never feel excited. You might never feel keen, but willingness leads the way. So, it's my hope that students who I come in contact with really take up that charge of willingness to learn, willingness to act. And that they learn that through the teachings of the feminist foremothers and present feminists who we read and engage with, because their lives are testament to this fact often. And I think especially for non-racialized students, I want them to know that and to leave spaces that we occupy together with that knowledge that there might never be a time where you feel ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just said willingness over readiness.
I can keep it at one.
Yeah. Willingness over readiness is really good.
Yeah.
And I think for me, if I can add to that, I think there's like, I'm never going to feel like an expert. And I don't think anybody should ever feel like they are an expert in this work.
Yeah.
Because I feel like once you feel like you're an expert, you probably either have stopped learning.
Out of the learning position. Absolutely.
Exactly. When this is it's life work. And there are constantly going to be things that need to be learned, unlearned, relearned. So I remind myself that perfectionism in this space is really, one, not welcome, two, what prevents folks from engaging as well.
100%. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good reminder, I think, to people who are like guiding this work, being part of this work, whatever your role is in this work, that lesson, I think, is true.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today, but also for helping us guide Module 3 of the SEED. I genuinely don't know that we would have been able to accomplish that module without you.
Oh, it was such a pleasure to be a small part of the amazing creation that y'all are offering to the world. So thank you for the invitation and for your offering.
Thank you. I'm looking forward as you enter the space of collaboration and creativity and more just openness and freedom to be able to continue working with you.
Yay, I hope so. Thank you so much. This time flew by.
I know. I was like, 9:30, it's plenty of time.
Oh, quickly.
Take care.
Okay, you too, Dani. Bye.
Bye.